Okay, we are live for episode 238 of Trek Live. How we doing?
Doing really good. Really excited to talk about Lower Decks this morning.
Yeah. This is what we've kind of been doing this year as seasons have wrapped up. We definitely like to take an hour on here on Trek Live to kind of look at the season as a whole. We also haven't really talked about the last handful of episodes, so I'm kind of looking forward to spending a couple minutes on 8, 9, and 10, and then kind of talking about our thoughts on the season as a whole. And Lower Decks is 40 episodes old now, four full seasons of Star Trek. So it's a pretty aged, like you know, seasoned Star Trek series at this point. So I feel like it definitely is time to kind of reflect on the season, maybe reflect on the show as we're heading into season 5 next year. Um, and looking forward to it.
Yeah. Besides Discovery, this is right. It's the
Longest.
show that has the most seniority on Paramount Plus. So yeah,
Uh,
it's weird.
yeah, it's definitely getting up there with the card wrapped up. It's about to be the longest running show when Discovery's over. This will be the senior show, which is crazy. And it's with the end of season 5, 50 episodes is uh, nothing to scoff at in this day and age with TV. So um, there's a lot to take in there and a lot to talk about. Um, but before we do that, I think Jeff's in the chat. How you doing, Jeff? Let's celebrate some lower decks. Absolutely, that's what we're here to do.
Yes, let's do it.
Looking forward to it. Um, you have anything rewatch wise you want to throw out there?
Yes. Again, I watched Sub Rosa
Yes.
last night. So not I don't know, not one of the best, but it's on the eve of Lower Decks. I think is my next episode, so it's
Mhm.
kind of I don't know, kind of hard, but
You think it's as bad as people say?
I some parts, yes, I think are definitely definitely played up, but I I don't know. I got through it. But it's one of those episodes for me that it's like um, I go into it with that kind of
Yeah.
attitude, kind of like just to give it a chance, and also to just to confirm that it's
What you
what
think it
how
is?
what I think it is, if it does deserve that stigma that it comes with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just continuing, like Bill said it a few weeks ago. It's just like this season 7 is kind of about family members, and
Mhm.
um, for good or bad, this is about Crusher's kind of family, and rest in peace, Nana.
Mhm.
But no, it's just I think I'll just real quick, because I know we got a lot to cover with
Yeah. No.
Lord X, but um, I think for me the most frustrating thing about the episode is that I wish that we had done, because I think Crusher gets a less and less this season here and there, and so I wish like her dedicated episode was
Mhm.
maybe something better than a
A little more
haunted
solid. Yeah.
candle. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's my rewatch update.
Yeah. Sub Rosa. It's interesting, and I echo a lot of that for sure. Yeah, I wish definitely tough pill to swallow that it's kind of like Crusher's last big spotlight episode, um, and yeah, it's unfortunate. Uh, but it's also one of those episodes that has a cult following. Like it's definitely infamous, and it's on the list of any list you would ever find. I think of like you know infamously terrible Star Trek episodes in the minds of many. But whenever you say that, there are people who come out of the woodwork and defend it for cool reasons. So um,
Yeah, especially now that I think these really cheesy Hallmark movies
yeah,
are really such a staple of
yeah,
modern TV
mhm.
and streaming services. I think it kind of fits right at home in something
Scratches that
like
itch. Yeah,
that.
definitely. Um, yeah. Jeff saying one thing he likes about season 7 is just how smooth the production feels, even with the less desirable episodes. I agree with that. I definitely think. you can definitely see the expertise of the production kind of coming into its own by the end of TNG for sure. It's such a well-honed machine at that point. The actors are so like comfortable in their roles, obviously, that even when the episode doesn't work, it's well done. Like it's for the when you take into account at this point it's a 25-year-old show. Um, when you get into season 6, 7, and you watch it through that lens, especially, I think it ages really well, even without putting that veneer on it. But certainly with that in mind, it's a really sleek, good production. Uh, and Subresh is no exception to that. It's you know it's got some cool production design elements, and it's, yeah, it's an interesting episode. That's for sure. Um,
Yeah.
I'm chugging along into season 3 of Voyager, season 5 of Deep Space Nine. I just watched the trio of episodes that Voyager uh, has that kind of gets dubbed the trilogy of terror. I think it is. It's Darkling, Rise, and Favorite Son. It's a
Oh, that's a rough patch.
it's a
Yeah.
rough threesome of episodes. Uh, I think all three of them have like a cool idea kind of behind them. I think they all are like good conceptual like Star Trek episodes. Um, they all try to like unlock some cool things about individual characters. Darkling gets into you know Kessa's place on the ship and kind of feeling uneasy about, is this where she wants to be for her whole life? She only has 9 years. Are there other things that she could be doing? And that certainly comes into play in just a few more episodes when she does head off. Um, the Doctor trying to enhance his program by adding in personality elements from like the world's most famous people, but it doesn't take into account that a lot of those people are very eccentric and have personality flaws, and he gets all of those and throwing them all together causes problems. Like I like the idea behind things like that. Rise gets really into the Tuvok Neelix yin and yang relationship. It's almost sort of like a weird extension to Tuvix. Very different story, very different episode, but the way that it kind of unpacks the complete opposites that those two characters are and how they interact with each other um, is a cool idea. And there's some good moments, I think, thrown in there. And I think some of the stuff in Favorite Son in the beginning, uh, this alien culture that wants to make you believe that they like kind of seed the galaxy with, um, you know, uh, d- d- uh, children that are like instinctually driven to come back and kind of fuel the population with unique, elements of the galaxy and stuff. Like they're neat science fiction ideas and cool character concepts throughout these 3 episodes, but I think they're all examples of like the execution and the what you get on screen kind of falling a little short. I'm not a fan of any of the 3 really at the end of the day, but I the unique or the common thread with all 3 is for the first 5 or 10 minutes of all 3 of them, I'm with them. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Maybe it's better than I remember. And nah, it
Yeah,
doesn't.
no,
It
it's not.
doesn't. It
Yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't stick.
Voyager has a lot of
A
those
lot
where
of
it's
that.
like the concept and the idea on paper
It's really
sounds
sound.
really really
Yeah.
cool and like really out there and
Yeah.
very science fiction
Yeah.
y, but yeah, just I think you're right. The execution just doesn't end well.
Yeah. Rise is really hampered by. I think it was Carl on Twitter. Pointed out like really. I said in my review really bad in my opinion. Get some guest performances in that are really rough. Carl said maybe the worst guest performance in all of Voyager. And I would probably agree. You can
Yeah,
find in that episode. So that it gets hampered by that. I think it's such an ambitious idea with the orbital lift. I just don't think that's an example of maybe being a little ahead of their time in terms of the idea and what they were capable of, really getting on screen just wasn't. They did the best they could, but I just don't think they had the capability to really execute that idea in a way that was gonna, you know, stick the landing. Like I said so.
yeah,
But really enjoying it overall. That's coming on the heels of a good run of episodes that I really enjoyed. And Deep Space Nine season 5 is well documented as a banger of
top
a
tier.
season. Yeah,
Yeah,
like just
yeah,
good episode after good episode. Very few uh, examples like Darkling and Rise and Favorite Son you're going to find in season 5 of Deep Space Nine. So, uh, moving right along. Getting. I'm about three-quarters of the way through both those seasons, and we'll get more into that stuff in the future. Um, but yeah, I think we should transition right into Lower Deck season four. We got a lot to cover, and before we get into the thoughts on the season as a whole, since we've kind of spent a few minutes on each of these episodes throughout the season, up until the last three, which we haven't talked about yet, the first of which is Caves. I think we should just spend a couple minutes on what we thought of that as the eighth episode of the season. I know I was a big fan of it. I think it's really, really good. But I'm curious, what do you think of Caves?
It's hard, and I'm sure we'll maybe touch on a little bit of the rankings, but these three episodes are like in the
Really good.
conversation of like, you know, top three of this season. So it's hard. Lower Decks does a really good job of ending a season. I think always, looking back at kind of the previous seasons, 1 through 3, they end fairly well. But
Yeah,
for me, Caves is definitely in conversation of one of the best this season.
agreed.
It really epitomizes the feeling of Lower Decks and found family that I think is such a common thread in Star Trek. And then when you package it into like this cute little funny commentary about how caves look, all this, like, it's just
Hmm.
man, it's really good.
Yeah, it's also a unique example of like A B plot is one thing, we get a lot of that, but this is like three or four little Star Trek episodes in one.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
each one of their little flashback stories is would be like a really cool episode of Lower Decks or Next Generation or any of the shows really. You could envision those kinds of stories filling an episode. The Mariner being stuck in a cave with crewmen that has an aging effect, and the little baby story with Tana and Rutherford. Like all these little stories are really strong, and are like little vignettes that are just long enough, but have enough meat on the bones to make you kind of wish you could stick with them for longer and that they could sustain like fuller episodes. So I love that about it. I thought it felt like in a show where we talk a lot about, we wish the seasons were a little longer. There was a little more there. It felt almost like a little bonus that we got these little mini stories to kind of fill out some extra um, stuff for Lower Decks. So I agree with you. It's definitely in the conversation for me. It's one of the stronger episodes of the season for my money, and it's all that stuff. But like you said, it's the way that it, to me, Lower Decks leans into the found family, their friendship, the thing that kind of binds them all together. That's when the show like kind of hits its sweet spot, and finds the right uh, tone for its humor too. Like I think when it's aimed at that, and it's playing the characters up, smartening them up, and highlighting their friendship. I think the show's kicking into gear usually when it's hitting those notes really well. So Caves is definitely an example of that for me.
Agreed. Really, really good episode. Yeah.
Yep. Um, Justice, does the storytelling device have a flashback for each character while waiting for a situation to resolve? Does that have a name? Feels like it's used in sitcoms sometimes. I don't know that it has a name. It probably should because it does happen. Uh, it's a good, like, I'm trying to think, like, does Star Trek have any other examples of this specific thing? I don't think it does. Like this specific, like various characters, like all having like little mini flashback, uh, vignette, short stories, um, to kind of bind one story together. I
I
don't,
don't think so.
and nothing comes to
Um,
mind.
yeah, I know not just sitcoms, Jeff, use it, but it's used in
It's
TV. This
common,
is like um, it's a really common kind of story structure. But I can't think of anything in Star Trek where
right?
like flashback specifically that we're getting trying to piece for waiting for the shoe to drop for the resolution of the actual story structure
Yeah,
itself.
Veritas
Yeah.
does it kind of.
Yeah,
Back in
true.
season one,
I guess a little bit. Yeah.
when they're on the trial, and they have to talk about like a little mission that they were all on. I guess that's like the sister episode of this one. Um, that's really good too. I like Veritas a lot. It's a little more chaotic than this is, uh, but this is I guess that's the only other episode that kind of covers the same terrain, as far as I'm remembering. I could be wrong. There's 800 some of them now, so uh, 900.
What's yeah. What's as far as lower decks goes, what's the I just man, this is bad. I just watched we were just in TNG. What when Riker's on trial on
Matter
this
of perspective.
vacation. Matter of perspective.
Mhm.
I don't know if that really qualifies, but
Sort of. I mean,
yeah.
it's not quite as like the stories
Is it a
aren't diverse, but
flashback?
it's
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
perspectives of a given event, like
Yeah,
from different point of
yeah,
views, points of view. Um, so that's maybe the closest we get to this kind
yeah,
of format. But like you said, I mean, it's done in TV very often. It may even, like Jeff's asking, it might even have a name. I'm sure it does in like writers' rooms. I'm sure there's some sort of parlance that they use to be like, this is what this is. And the fact that Lower Decks is the first show to kind of uncrack that and use it in Star Trek is, whether you count like Veritas or this as the first of that kind of format. I think both kind of are. That's a feather in Lower Decks' cap, and the fact that both of those episodes are good, I think, at least in my book, um, is cool too. So uh, yeah, so I guess we're both pretty big fans of Caves. We both have that up in our ranks, pretty high, for Lower Deck season 4. It's got a lot of heart. The mini stories. I just think it has everything you're kind of looking for in this show in particular, uh, and does everything that this show does best really well. So a good strong episode of Lower Decks. A lot of good humor in it too. Um, the inner fight is the big one for me. Episode 9. Uh, this is 9 and 10 are a pseudo two-parter, not in name. It's not a part one, part two, but there's a definite to be continued element here. Um, but they're kind of different episodes. I mean, this one, if you think about like what happens in both, if you're looking to like think of a log line, them being on the planet, all the different aliens, um, the mystery of who's, what's up with Locarno. Locarno is not really on screen here until the very, very end. They're very different episodes, I would say, in terms of like what they do, but the story is certainly very serialized between 9 and 10. Uh, what did you think of the inner fight, first of all, as 9, episode 9?
it's really good, top tier.
Yeah, I
Again,
think so.
I mentioned at the top of the show that these 3 episodes are like in conversation for the best 3 episodes of the
Yeah.
season. So
Mhm.
um, I feel like we're splitting hairs here a little bit, but no, it's really 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 good. And I see a lot of people talking about how it feels like with Mariner and her struggling to kind of get over this thing. I think there was some hesitation to go back to something like this, and um, there's a great discussion on Trek Ranks episode that covers similar season 4 stuff, but um, I think it feels different with this Mariner payoff, because it felt so um, set up a little bit better in that it's multiple episodes through the season. It felt more serialized,
Yeah.
and then other seasons it felt like we got a big chunk of it, but it was just like just one episode.
One. Yeah.
Um, and so I kind of like the payoff here, and it's from the start of the season, one of the first episodes. So um, I really like the payoff. I really like that it's like on the planet it's like a pseudo federation that they're kind of
Mm.
working together, and then there's some great callbacks to Star Trek 4 with stealing the shit. It's just I don't know. It's really good, and I really enjoyed kind of the Mariner stuff payoff a lot. So all really good stuff in this episode.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really kind of establishing itself, I think, is like the calling card for this episode being a great one is the continuity going back to the first duty and Lower Decks, not just kind of using Locarno as like fill in the blank bad guy, but you know having it be about Cedo, who was in that group in the First Duty and eventually in lower decks on the ship on the Enterprise D, um, and having what happens to her kind of be the thing that affects Mariner and has her kind of twisted in knots and stuck in life. Having that be something that we kind of know about and can relate to, um, I think was a cool choice. I think using the serialized format in season 4 to kind of, like you said, slowly build up to this and not have there be like in prior seasons. I feel like you know we get little tastes of it, like you said, but maybe in one episode you get a lot. Like in Crisis Point, there's a lot of time spent on why Mariner is the way she is and what she's trying to do to snap out of it. But I think this season has done a really nice job of like kind of slowly building toward kind of answering this question that you get the answer to here in the inner fight, um, and having it be tied to such an unexpected connection to Star Trek's past, um, it was a satisfying surprise. I would say, uh, yeah,
Yeah, and it feels like a drama almost.
yeah,
Like it
yeah,
feels, and again,
weighty, yeah,
and it just feels like that's so cool because like I feel like a lot of the times I forget that um Lower Decks really gets written off as just the comedy show, but
the
I
light.
think it really does do like drama stuff very well,
It
and,
does,
and tying it to the um to previous Trek really well, just as well as the other shows do.
yeah.
um and so yeah, I just yeah, I find that really cool, and yeah, really successful that it kind of does that, and it helps us. um I always was unsure of like how old these like lower deckers are, and so it kind of like helps me a little bit, kind of like, okay, this
Hmm.
is kind of where they're at. So
Yeah,
it's yeah, really cool.
I think having a Klingon that we know from a couple seasons ago in Wage Douche, uh, there's just something about I think Mariner talking to a Klingon and having the Klingon use very Klingon perspectives to draw this out of her is like really satisfying Star Trek stuff too. It just kind of hits that sweet spot for me in a cool way. I love that scene. I think that might be my favorite scene in Lower Decks. Those two characters talking in the cave, yet another cave, um, and kind of like I said, answering that question that's kind of been lingering for 4 seasons now, and kind of getting to the the meat of the matter with what Mariner is all about. Um, and like you said, yeah, the other stuff happening on the planet with the aliens who have been abducted over the course of the season, kind of having the pseudo alliance federation kind of happening on the planet is a cool idea too. Big Star Trek idea. Love it when they do that. And I think it's another example. There have been a couple of them this season. Uh, with Captain Freeman looks really good at her job and really smart. I think the way she plays that situation is really cool Star Trek stuff that you
It's a
would see.
staple of this season, I think.
Yes, yeah. When the show's good, it like I said, when this show falters, it's when they play the characters down and they pull humor from the characters making silly mistakes or acting in ways that aren't kind to them. Uh, these last couple of episodes in this season, really, uh, the bulk of this season, there are a couple of exceptions, but for the bulk of the season, I think many of the characters have looked really good, and I think Captain Freeman is at her best in this episode. You can see Captain Janeway doing the same thing, for example. I totally envision like the best of Star Trek captains kind of uncorking a situation that way and playing the long game, the long con. Um, that was a really cool uh, development too. I really enjoyed that. Um, so
Yeah,
my favorite episode of the season for sure. That's just speaking for myself. Like I agree with you
yeah,
that I think these last three are all kind of in
yeah.
the same, kind of general wavelength. Um, but I think probably because of the heft of it, like you said, there's like a dramatic weight to the inner fight uh, to go along with the humor that's there. I think that probably edges it maybe up a few slots for me and gets it into into the top spot in my book, at least.
Also, in my book, like dramatic elements like this don't get solved in a season. So yeah, no, I keep harping on talking about people like are thinking about the Mariner stuff might be overused. I think just this type of stuff doesn't get resolved in 23-minute episodes. So I like
Right.
to see it spread across seasons. So
Hmm. More
yeah,
realistic.
really more realistic. Yeah.
Jeff says that he likes how Mariner gives off Jadzia vibes when dealing with Klingons. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Very comfortable.
100%. Yeah.
Knows how to deal with a Klingon. Knows how to talk to a Klingon. Gets on the Klingon wavelength to hash stuff out, and definitely agree with that. The finale, Old Friends, New Planets. Um, how'd you feel about the finale? The way it wraps up the season. Um, yeah,
It did a really good job. I think it I don't know, felt really true to Star Trek ending a season with a really action adventure
yeah,
type of chase and some really good payoffs
mhm,
and some funny and uh, really good reveals. I think just all around, just really solid episode. That that I don't know. It checks all the boxes for a season finale. I think. Um, Similar to maybe some Strange New Worlds vibes, we do get a character that leaves the group.
mhm.
But again, it doesn't feel kind of out of place for me. It feels, we got a lot of stuff with Tindy kind of setting
Yeah,
this up. So
absolutely.
um, I buy that, and but no, I think the I think it was really successful. The payoff of the mystery of the season, I think, was just really felt right at home. It didn't feel too big for Lower Decks. It felt
Yeah,
kind of right at home. But
yeah,
I also liked
agreed.
that they didn't just do like another like I know there's a lot this season with Badgie and stuff like that, but there wasn't like a
Yeah,
bad entity like that. Like it was like a I don't know. It felt
felt
like this.
smaller, more. Yeah,
Yeah, it felt right at home at Lower Decks as far as like the payoff of who the bad guy in the mystery of the season was. So
mhm.
um, I don't know. It felt right at home.
Yeah, I concur. I'm with you. I feel like it was a good. It felt aligned with Lower Decks as a concept. Didn't feel too big. Didn't feel too small. I think they found the just right uh, like scale of what was happening, and the threatening nature of what was going on. I felt like in season three, honestly, like that's probably my least favorite of the finales because I think they maybe bit off a little more than they could
Went
chew. I
too
think it
big.
went a little too big
Yeah,
and maybe a
yeah,
little too reminiscent of other modern Star Trek show finales and like kind of the way that it becomes about like AI and like that's been done in Picard and it was done in Discovery. I felt like it was a little redundant. This felt fresh and better calibrated to the series for me. Um, uh, with it being, a lot of these different alien cultures have the same sort of thing with lower deckers and, people who feel unsatisfied or struggling in their careers and how Locarno kind of plays on that and manipulates uh, folks who feel that way. Um, I love the Star Trek II callbacks. I thought that was really well done. Very fan servicey, but I think like really well done, really well pitched, just enough. Um, and I think Mariner's really heroic in the episode, going toe to toe with Locarno.
yeah,
Uh, I think she's really awesome in it. I think the use of the big Hulk that they're given by the Orions, the useless giant juggernaut ship, and the way that they
yeah,
use it ends up being really awesome and really like
yeah.
a cool Star Trek moment. Um, yeah, it kind of checks all the boxes for me too. I think when you're thinking of like a season finale for a fairly serialized storyline. It's got to you know uh, resolve a lot of things at the same time. It's got a lot of balls in the air. It's got to do stuff with the Tendi story. It's got to do stuff with obviously the Mariner stuff. Even Boimler gets like a little crack at being an acting captain. The characters feel like they all get big moments that pay off things that they've been dealing with all season, with their promotions and kind of elevating their careers and dealing with changes that are coming from those things. Um, I think it accomplishes all those things, and it sets up some cool things that should play out in season five. Like it tees up some interesting things that we can carry with us going into next season. Obviously, the Tendi, where she is and how we leave her. I think T'Lyn kind of choosing to leave the Vulcan thing behind, ignoring the captain's call. Um, like there are just enough things that like allude to what's coming, that make it like it's not just finishing. It's not like just a completely, you know, brick wall ending to a season. That's teeing up uh, things to come as well. So it left me wanting more. I'm ready for season five because of what this episode did. So I was really happy with it. I think it's rock solid season finale.
Yeah, it's as good as it gets, I think, for the season. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good. Which is a big ask because like that's a tall order to be able to do everything they did in that short of time. I
Yeah.
think yeah, it's really good. It's I don't it's hard because I think of like other season fours in Star Trek. I'm like, is like at this point in a lot of Star Trek shows, this is where the show really hits its stride.
Yeah.
And you know, it's tough for me to feel like to see, you know, Paramount Plus really be committed to like a 5-season cap for some of these shows. And yeah, I guess a
It feels
conversation
like,
for another day.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you because I do think it does feel reminiscent of TNG, DS9, Voyager, where the show feels like it's kind of found that perfect little, like, you know, lane. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of worked out a lot of the kinks, and I feel
Yeah.
like it's like ready to, you know, hit that stride, to maybe, you know, this is a show that makes me want like a 7 season run so that you get a little runway with the show having found its voice the way that I think it did this season for my
Yeah.
money. I mean, I should definitely transition to this, I think, and talk about like this how do we feel about this season as a whole? Do we think it's the best the show's been? I think you've kind of already alluded to that, with what you just said, and I agree with you. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, what do you think? Yeah,
I think
is it your favorite?
I think it's my favorite season of Lower Decks so far. And it's yeah, I don't and I'm not saying that, you know, there's some things that didn't land for me this season. There
Sure.
is.
Yeah.
But I think just where these characters are and I think the decision to promote these felt right at home because like you said, like this show feels so in their lane, like so solid on their footing as far as characters and story and all that. I think it made a nice progression of to promote them. But I just yeah, it's hard. It's like a catch-22 because like I know that the Paramount feels committed, but it's also like I think as far as like if I looked at this objectively with you know, production costs, it might be a little bit less than some of these live action shows. Maybe could push the boundary and see if we could get those 7 seasons. But again, I it's hard because the way the landscape is. But no, it just it feels really it felt like to me my favorite of Lower Decks. So and it felt good with great serialization, I think, not just in this season, but like previous seasons, like we talked about, a call back to previous seasons,
Yeah.
and just enough character development to really keep me interested into the next season. Like I just think it really checked all the boxes, and it just hard to try to get my to swallow that pill. The next season might be the last.
Yeah.
So.
That is a tough pill to swallow. Yeah, I would agree. I think this season, I think found the right mix of serialized, episodic for this show. Um, I think the way that they handled not just the like ongoing threat and the, the the way that that story is kind of ongoing, but the character threads and building those developments to pay off at the end was the thing that probably sets the season apart for me. I think having that element really juiced up the show. Um, I think shaking up the foundation a bit with the promotions, like you said, uh, having them deal with like kind of fundamental changes. Kind of felt like it matured the show, made the show take a step forward, changed the show at a point that it probably needed a little jolt, at least in my opinion. And I think T'Lyn, it was a good addition. When she's on screen, she adds a lot to the table, brings just enough of like a different flavor. Uh, but it's sometimes it's a tricky you know line to walk. Like you want to introduce a new character that brings new flavors to the table, adds to the ensemble, but doesn't necessarily like take it over either. Like doesn't diminish other characters. And Star Trek has kind of had mixed results, I think, with that as they've added characters. Sometimes they've had more success than others um, with doing that, at least in like the short term. Um, but I think this felt really like a natural addition that kind of enhanced the whole. Um, so all those factors kind of together make it, my favorite. I really like season 2 as well, but I think this because of the serialized nature of it, the changes that came, and I think probably the way that it ended. I mean, Lower Decks kind of had the habit of this. If you look at each season of Lower Decks, like you kind of allude to it
They
tends
do.
to they
Yeah.
tend to end strong.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think the yeah, the people's perception of the show are like heavily swayed by how it ends.
yes,
So,
yeah, yeah. Like very very like there's a formula to this show that has kind of started to take root. I feel like those early episodes of the season tend to be very establishing of some of these things that are going to be explored and can sometimes feel a little slight, a little light, uh, and could leave people feeling a little empty maybe early. But as the season progresses and kind of starts to wrap up, it kicks into another gear, and I think this is certainly an example of that this season. So. Um, yeah, I'm very happy with it. I hope that it gets more than a 5 season run. I think some of Mike McMahon's words over the last couple of weeks are a
yeah,
little
he's not
alarming.
too optimistic. Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I saw a lot of chatter about over the last couple of weeks is Mike McMahon uh, in those interviews talk a lot about also what I'm alluding to is he talked a lot about like people have to watch the show. It's really important. We have season 5 greenlit that's being worked on, but we have no guarantees for anything beyond, and that's important. But he also talked about wanting to be really conscious of spoilers for episodes 9 and 10, and being very protective of any information leaking out. And some folks online, I felt like were kind of actually pushing back against that because they felt like his comments made people think and set like an expectation that it was going to be bigger, more uh, kind of foundational shifting, made people think like who's going to be in it, what are they going to bring out of the continuity,
I don't think
landscape.
that's necessarily Mike McMahon's fault, though. I feel like
No,
that's the Enterprise D's fault. Like that's
right. And people have this expectation,
yeah,
but I also
exactly.
think that part of the reason he said those things was it successfully generated traffic. Like it got people talking, speculating, and got people. conversing about the show on social media, which generates attention, and that's kind of part of what gets measured in this streaming world. Like, is there a detectable blip in the algorithms out there where people online are talking about your show, or are they not? And I think he successfully got people a little jazzed up and created maybe an uptick in, you know, chatter that can only help the
Yeah.
show. I get where people were coming from. Like when you throw things out there like it's so huge, it's so huge. I don't want like we're not sending screeners out until like 2 days before it airs. Like we're being really careful about. We're not giving you the episode name, even though we always do. Like all of this being that elevated level of protective made people kind of guard against like, well, what the heck are they going to do? I get where they're saying that maybe they felt a little like, did you really need to do that? I think yes, because this show needs people talking about it. And I think that aligns with the stuff he was saying about nothing's guaranteed beyond season 5. People need to watch the show when it drops. Don't let it sit and wait. And people need to talk about it. It needs to generate attention so that the suits and the bean counters see, that
Yeah.
it makes a dent
Yeah.
somewhere. It's not just quietly being watched and nobody talks about it. That's what gets shows axed, I think, in this day and age, as much as anything. So I respect what he did. I think he did the right thing for his show, because there was, I think, a little more speculation and a little more open discussion about what's it going to be, how's this going to end, in a way that like Picard did, in the way that Strange New Worlds generates. It's tough to compete with those live action shows, and I think he's trying to claw out any like little extra
Yeah.
chatter that he possibly can, and I hope he continues to do that. So
Yeah. I don't know. That's how I always deal with spoilers.
you do, yes.
I hate
You don't want to know anything.
spoilers, so I don't want to know anything. So, yeah, and people who get validation from knowing something before the masses have a special place, not in my heart, because I don't like those people.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject. There are some people who really like to just gather as much information as possible ahead of time, and there are people who want to know nothing and want to go in as blind as possible. And there's a lot of in the middle, in between. Like I'm kind of, I don't like to know. I don't want to know details, but I do go on Trek Core on Monday morning and read the episode title and read the little synopsis that they drop that doesn't tell you anything, and then I kind of stop there. You even stop before that. You don't look at that stuff. You try to avoid as much of it as you can, and I definitely respect that. And Mike McMahon was out looking for you. he was trying to protect you, and that's cool. But I do think he was also trying to gin up, the speculation and the discussion on the fandom social media front to try to help the show. And he's the showrunner, and it's his show, it's his passion project, and he should, I think, use any tools that he has to lift it up and try to generate as much helpful attention as he can. So.
Yeah.
Jeff says as the season went along, it was not his favorite, but when he went back to watch episodes 3 through 7, it really grew on him. Like the previous shows, 90s Trek felt so smooth episode to episode. And yeah, I think that's kind of what Lower Decks captures, that kind of comfort.
But I mean, Jeff, real quick, the episode, I kind of want to mention this because there's a kind of middle of the road episode, empathological fallacies.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like a bottle show right out of the 90s Trek. Mm-hmm. Like that, I just, and for me, it's kind of in the middle of my rankings, but I think that, I think Jeff's right. Some of these episodes do feel, straight out of 1994. So, yeah, and that episode, to me, it's middle of the season, but I think it's fun that they can still do a bottle show, and I think, this show is kind of equipped to do maybe some outside the box things with
Yeah,
the animation.
for sure.
So I like that they still keep true to Star Trek, that there's still at least one
Really
bottle
small.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah, really small, contained episode that's just kind of more or less takes place on the ship, and
Yeah.
so yeah,
What you kind of alluded to that, something that's been really interesting in that comment. Like, obviously, one of the big things that happens these days, thanks to Trek ranks and people sharing these kinds of things, uh, you know, seasons end and people drop their ranks, the 1 through 10, how do I rank the episodes? I feel like this season of Lower Decks, it's very all over the place. An episode like in Pathological Fallacies, you see it all over the place in those ranks. I've seen it at
yeah,
the top. There are people I
yeah.
know that we've interacted with
Top
on social
five,
media that
yeah,
have it way
yeah,
up there, like
yeah,
in the upper tier, and then some people have it at the bottom, and there's a lot of it in the middle. I'm with you. I kind of have it in the middle of the pack. Uh, but there's a lot of inconsistency. An episode that I'm not too fond of, the something borrowed something green, uh, grown a little bit on me because I think the Tendi Orion stuff is important, and like if you go back to stuff we talked about in years past, your see it or skip it kind of way of looking at things, like you can't argue against something borrowed something green from that standpoint. It's
yeah.
critical
Now
to
you
lower
have to
deck stuff.
watch it. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but there are things in it that really grate on me, so I have it down pretty low. Other people have that way at the top because of those kinds of things. So it's a really interesting season because there's not a lot of consistency when it comes to how people stack the episodes, which I always love to see.
yeah,
They were more interesting to me than the seasons that you look at all these different ranks and they're kind of all the same handful in the top 3 or 4, the same 2 at the bottom, and maybe some, you know, flipping around in the middle is more common than not in this day and age. I feel like, but this season, Parth Ferenghi's Heart Place, I've seen that. I have that pretty towards the top of my list, and I've seen other people have that down.
yeah.
It's really, if you badges more, same thing. Some people are high, some people are low. Um, I love to see that. I think that's a cool, unique aspect of the season.
I think that's a mark of a good season though, because
Yeah,
I think like Strange New Worlds was similar to that, where the wide variety of episodes and fluctuations of people's rankings. I think it fluctuated even
yeah,
in Strange New Worlds,
yeah.
and I
It did.
think
Mhm.
that's a good tell of the fandom at large as well, because I think Star Trek has always been inherently like there's an episode for everyone. That's kind of like the big kind of selling point for Star Trek, and I
Yeah.
think it's I don't know, when the fandom is not uh, aligned. I think that's when Star Trek is at its best, because
Mhm.
there is an episode for everybody.
Yeah.
So um, I'm actually fine with having a wide variety
I
of
love
like
it.
yeah,
It makes looking at those lists interesting. I mean, there are times, like especially with the more serialized shows, I feel like it's more common to see the same basic ranks, with very minor changes around the margins and some stuff getting flipped around. Picard season 3, I think you generally look at it and you see, yeah, no win scenario, Last Generation, uh, the Bounty and Pot. Like it's always the same kind of 3 or 4 at the top with some different reordering at the middle and the bottom. Stranger World season 2, this uh, there's a good variety of um, versions of that list, and I makes it interesting. And like you said, it validates that mission statement of like we're gonna do different things. We're gonna hit different kinds of stories. In Lower Decks' case, I think they hit different kinds of humor. I think the humor in Caves is different than the humor in Pathological Fallacies, uh, and
oh
is
yeah,
different than the humor in Tuvix. Each of those episodes kind of takes a different approach to how to generate the humor, and like how slapsticky, how chaotic, how loud, how subtle, uh, and you know that's, I think, when you see that kind of result, it does validate, I think, that being willing to change and adjust the calibration of the
yeah.
episodes.
And I think that again, your mileage may vary on some of those humor stuff. There's some of the humor that felt over the over the line as far as that I find funny, and so
Yeah.
it's again it's there's something for everybody in this
Hmm.
season.
Yeah, definitely. Jeff's agreeing with you that the seasons where you see some variance in those things, it kind of indicates it was probably a good season with a lot of variety, and that was successful. And I'm with you. I agree. Um, I want to say more about the year as a whole, but I think we'll save that. That's a conversation that I think we have to have now that the product on screen is completed for the year. We got 30 episodes this year, so a little less than 2022. We had 51 in 2022 across 5 shows. This is 30 across 3. But I think we've both kind of been on the record on Twitter over the last couple of weeks saying, tough year off screen, great year on screen in terms of like the quality of the episodes, the quality of the seasons. We're going to dive into that as we kind of wrap up our year here on Trek Live. We usually go on hiatus in mid-December until early January. I'm sure we'll do that again, but so we only have a couple shows left before we kind of do that. And before the year's out, we'll kind of do like a post-mortem on 2023, just like we did with 2022 at the end of last year, and look at Picard season 3, Stranger World season 2, Lower Deck season 4 as kind of a collective whole, and how we kind of feel about what was. It was a tough year with the strikes, and which we thank God finally over. Hopefully we'll start to get some news about things that are getting shot and moving forward here in the next few weeks, next few months. The stagnation will kind of let off a little bit.
Which I feel like my tinfoil hat comes out. I'm like, could they have pushed to get Discovery done by November? Maybe, but yeah, but I think with the kind of state of television right now, they're like, you know what?
Let's spread the calendar out.
We need to spread the calendar out because it might be the only Star Trek in 2024. So
might be, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's certainly going to be looming large. I think we're hopefully going to find out pretty soon. I said this last time we were here, but hopefully we'll find out pretty soon here when Discovery is going to drop. But that feels like a big deal to me. It's continuing to feel like a big deal to me that's gonna wrap up. Picard's done, but Discovery being kind of the inaugural show of this era of Trek, and I guess I'm a little more sentimental to Discovery than even Picard, because Picard was a shorter run and kind of felt contained for 3 seasons. Discovery was a little different, and that feels momentous, like you said. So we'll definitely be talking some Discovery as we wrap up the year and get into early next year.
It started this craziness, so
yeah,
pay it its due.
Got to definitely have to do that. So, well, this was a lot of fun. Lower Deck season 4 is awesome. I think we both agree on that. The season ended really strong, as the show tends to do, and I think that'll do it for us. We'll definitely be back in 2 weeks, and probably one more time, maybe in 4 weeks, maybe in 6 weeks. I'm not sure. I'm not too familiar with the calendar yet. Two-ish shows left.
2.5 shows left, probably, because we'll probably do. Bill and I are working on doing maybe the Trek After Dark as well for the Discord folks. So, or for whoever wants to join. But yeah, the discussion doesn't have to stop here. Come over to Twitter, Discord as well as to continue the discussion. All our ranks are on there for the season, so if you want to see, we'd love to hear from where your episodes kind of stack up this season. You can check out Bill and I's rankings on Twitter. We look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks. Thank everybody for watching. Thank Jeff and Cyber Honey in chat for sticking with us this morning.
Yeah.
And
Thank you
we'll
as always.
see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.